Hey, welcome everyone. It is the Ladies Takeover of Liberty Risk Podcast. My name is Megan, and everyone else can fuck off. So, so this is our first episode, and please forgive me if I'm a little nervous. Also, first thing on my list, we're gonna do. Where did I write it down? Because my brain isn't quite working just yet. I haven't had enough to drink just yet. We're gonna do a poll on the intro music. If you like the music that I was playing and dancing to, now I'm out of breath. If you like that music, please let us know because we're trying to figure it out. And there's some songs where I'm like, this sounds like absolute asshole. Like it sounds like somebody just farted into a trumpet. So please let me know and help me figure out what would be best. How is everyone doing? I'm having a pretty good night. I got my COVID vaccine. You know, I'm not going to be spreading no zombie virus to anybody else. I will say, this vaccine, though, I stood outside for half an hour in the freezing cold. It was snowing for this vaccine. I was one of the youngest people there. Everyone else was elderly. It was very uncomfortable because I felt like I shouldn't be there. Like, uh, I'm too young for this place. Like, these people should get this vaccine before me. And apparently, here in New Jersey, we're almost out of the vaccine. Like, you're not going to be able to get it soon enough. So, if you are not afraid of getting this vaccine, I would highly suggest it because it's a very small needle. They didn't put a microchip in me that I know of. Yeah, it's really tiny. It only took 2 seconds. It doesn't hurt too bad. I've got my chicken wings still working so I can dance for everybody. What else do I have on the list? Oh yeah, I don't know if people have heard this, but this was brought to my attention by Jeannie, which she's on her way home now. She's not in yet. She has informed me she's almost home. There we go. The Air Force has changed their regulation on female hair. So like, I have a braid. This would be allowed. This would be allowed now. If I wanted to have 2 braids, that would be allowed. Honestly, from somebody that was a mechanic before, that is huge news to me because I used to do the double braids and then put it into a bun, and that was how I wore my hair to work every day. Or it was like falling out like this and it just looked like ass all the time. But there's not much I can do as a mechanic because I'm dirty, I'm sweaty, I'm greasy, I got oil on my face, somebody's shit is on my face, probably actual real shit or their tobacco spit. I don't even know what was on my face at some points. But having that ability to not worry about your hair and having it up in a bun, like, granted, I didn't give a shit. I would just take my hair down. And on the ship, they have different guidelines. Like, you can like ease your hair or whatever. But for other places, like in the medical field or in admin, they're so stringent on their rules to have it in that beautiful sock bun, the beautiful donuts. Honestly, kudos to those people because I don't have the patience for that. I have no idea how to do a sock bun. I don't think I ever did one while I was in. So they just changed their guidelines on it. So a low ponytail, a single braid, or 2 double braids. Like, and the bulk of it cannot be wider than the person's head, so I can't have like my ponytail out here. And it cannot go past like the armpit area. So if you're in the Air Force and you don't like putting your sock bun in because it's giving you a 5 head, this is your chance to change things. Okay, now that we're done with our PSAs for the day, I have an amazing guest tonight, and I'm so incredibly excited to have her on. So everyone help me please welcome Melissa Trachtenberg.
Hi,
Hey
everyone.
Melissa,
Hi.
how is it going?
It's going. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. So you are a mental health counselor from New York. Can you kind of tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I was born and raised in Brooklyn. Well, technically, I guess I was born in Queens for like 5 minutes, and then I was brought to Brooklyn and raised in Brooklyn. and I lived there for most of my life. I went away to Binghamton University for my undergrad, and anyone who doesn't know, that's about 200 miles upstate New York. And then after I graduated with a psychology degree, I came back to the city to work. And I think I mentioned this in the bio that I sent you, to take care of my dad, who suffers from
Hmm.
mental illness and gambling addiction and all kinds of things. And so I helped to take care of him and keep him in some kind of quality of life while I worked and figured out the next steps for myself. So I worked in research, yeah, in
Oh,
behavioral
awesome.
health research, yeah, for over a decade. So I've worked at
Oh my God.
NYU psychiatry department, and we did actually, that study is quite interesting. We looked at first break psychosis patients and marijuana use to see if there's a link between regular or heavy marijuana use and first break mental illness, but psychosis, hallucinations, delusions, breaks from reality. And then after that, I moved on to the Visiting Nurse Service of New York. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that agency, but
I
they're
am
a,
not, but
that's okay. They're a home care provider in New York City, Westchester, Nassau, and Suffolk County. And they have a research center there, and we looked at population disparities for minority populations in chronic disease management and also other behavioral health outcomes. And I did that for a very long time before
oh wow.
I went back to school to pursue more of my psychology life, and I did my master's in mental health counseling and wellness at NYU. Um, and then the rest is just here. Now I do private practice and two practices, and I see clients regularly, and build my like professional portfolio that way.
That's awesome. That's so great to hear. That's super interesting that you did research for so long. I had no idea that that you had done that, and also being part of research and looking into like how marijuana affects a person with heavy usage. That's really interesting. We have had several discussions on here about medical marijuana and the legalization of marijuana. So
Okay.
it's cool to hear a kind of a different side of it. Like, hey, I've done this research side of it.
Okay.
Um, and now you work for Promise Pathways now,
Yeah.
which is Stephanie Kalachi's company.
Yep.
Um, and is this recent that you've started working there?
With Stephanie, yes. So I was working. I do work also at another private practice for a while, and moved my life from Brooklyn out to Long Island and started looking for a Long Island based practice. And I found Stephanie's practice, and I really loved the mission and sort of everything that it was about. And unfortunately, when I started reaching out, it was all at the start of COVID and everything was delayed, and she was changing the dynamic of the practice to accommodate COVID restrictions and how the pandemic has ruined everybody's life. So she's doing that. And I had to wait, but we stuck with it. We were in contact, messaging. She's like, follow up with me in a month. And I was like, okay. And, back and forth, back and forth. And I started with her, I want to say in the fall.
In the fall? That's awesome.
So
How have you been liking it? You can be honest.
how do I like it? No, I really like it. I think Stephanie's great. I think that she listened to what I said I was interested in and tried to refer me clients that, would be of interest to me to work with. And she tries really hard. I think, and maybe she's watching, I don't know, but I think that she works a lot, like maybe too much, she's like always on, always working. Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
very dedicated to her professional identity. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she definitely is. Now, for the people listening out there, so Stephanie Kalachi is actually my stepmom. So that's kind of that's the connection here. So I can say what I want about her because at the end of the day, when I go home for like Christmas or Thanksgiving, she's gonna be chasing me around the house with a wooden paddle and probably beat my butt. um, no, if there's anyone I have the utmost respect for, it is her. And that's awesome that you have found a home within her practice and that you've really been able to kind of grow there as well. So, what exactly do you practice? Like, what are your specialties?
Sure. So, the kinds of clients that I see between the two practices, I see a lot of adjustment disorders, people struggling with different transitions in their lives and the loss of certain identities and the changing of roles. And along with that comes a lot of anxiety and depressive symptoms. So, we'll see a lot of that. Also, working with clients who have eating disorder behaviors. Um, we have OCD behaviors. We have clients with bipolar disorder. We have clients with personality disorders. And then grief counseling, of course. There's a lot of loss, especially now in the last year. Loss can come in multiple forms as well. Like we're talking about loss of a person. When you talk about that, you usually think of like bereavement, like people who are bereaved, they've lost a loved one. But there's also loss in terms of loss of identity, loss of job, loss of housing, loss of security, safety, sense of self. There's so much a person can lose and grieve over time. So we do a lot of grief work as well. Um, I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but pretty much you name it, we see it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I know something that I experienced when separating out of the Navy 2 years ago
Mhm.
was a definite a definite grieving period where I had a complete loss of self, because for the 6 years that I served, I was a mechanic, I was an aviation machinist mate. That was who I was, and I was a second class. I was proud of it. I had achieved that goal.
Mm-hmm.
And coming out, I had lost that identity. And I know a ton of veterans feel the same way, where say they make it to an E9 or they make it to an O4 and they're so proud of how far they've come, and then to come out and basically people around them are like, you ain't shit now. Like, you're nothing anymore. You have to start from the bottom all over again, especially when, if you're getting out and you are like, I have to start working in a civilian job,
Right.
you're starting from the bottom. You're not starting midway in the tier. You're, the low man on the totem pole again.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see a lot of that in your practice?
So specifically with veterans, I wouldn't say that we see a lot of veterans because they tend to stay within the TRICARE benefit structure a lot of the time. But
Mm-hmm.
in terms of loss of role or identity or shift, absolutely, 100%. We'll see it with people who have a sudden career shift, or because of disabilities, they can no longer do what they used to do, and they had to give up a career path and they had to start something new, feeling like they had no idea what they were doing, feeling like they were out of place and that they had lost all of the status, the seniority, the authority, and the power that they held in that other role. Now they don't have that anymore, and they feel
Yeah,
uncertain and unsure, and as though all of that work was for nothing. So we do see that in different ways.
yeah. What are some other forms of grief that people come in and see? Now, I know you said bereavement,
Mhm.
um, loss of a person. What are some other uh, types that you see most often?
So a lot of times, what we'll see, loss of a person, bereavement. It would also include loss of status of somehow, like someone who had a particular job or a particular role, and they no longer have it, and they don't know what to do. They don't know their identities anymore. We also see older adults who are struggling with loss of sense of self. What's my purpose now? If they have children and the children are grown and they feel like they don't have anything to offer anymore. So we'll see some of that kind of loss. Also, in terms of trauma, we'll see people with trauma who have lost their sense of safety and trust in the world and a sense of themselves, disassociating, things like that. Those are griefs, those are losses, for sure. And then you have your more adjustment based losses, housing, jobs, mementos, things you've collected over your life that have been lost, or house fires, things like that. Those create tremendous amounts of loss. Imagine you grew up in a home and you lived there your whole life, and there was a house fire and you lost everything from your childhood. That is a
That would
hard,
be
yeah,
devastating.
yeah. So we do see things like that, and it's hard.
So we have a question from one of our viewers. Oh, it's you. We can ignore it. No kidding.
Oh, okay. Really? Or you're
Does
kidding? Are you kidding?
No, I'm kidding. I'm
Oh,
kidding. He's
okay.
got good questions sometimes. Does their loss of status, bereavement, go away when they get another job, even if it isn't at the same level of authority?
So it depends, right? That's a hard question. Like, it's going to depend on things like if you were asking that for yourself, I would ask you so many questions. Like, what were your social supports in your life when you were making that transition? Were you lonely? Were you feeling like a burden to the people around you? Were you no longer able to care for yourself and others, and you had to get this other, let's say, job that is not fulfilling to you, that is not meaningful to you in any way? And then no, you wouldn't regain that sense of self immediately. You'd probably develop a type of anxiety or depression around that change that you felt powerless over. Like, I can't control this, I can't make it better. All I can do is this job. If you were to transition to a new career and you had support systems and you had a lot of resilience and self-care strategies, and you decided to pivot and change and try something new and you liked it, then absolutely. Then you're like on an upward trajectory. You're going to gain back sense of self, purpose. You're going to be proud of yourself maybe for trying something new, and you're going to have all those good feelings going on.
Wonderful. Yeah, I can I can see that. I know, and I'm trying to relate the broad picture for everyone. I know I got out and super sad, much cry, and um, now that I have this new career that I'm starting out in Denver, that sense of purpose, that sense that I'm going to have something where I'm working towards a goal with others is so important to me, and it feels like, I don't know, it's all those good feelings inside where you're just like, yes, I'm accomplishing something. It is it is a tangible accomplishment. It is something that I can actually look and see, and I'm happy about it. Um, and I feel like that is one of the most important aspects of it, is just making sure that you feel good about moving forward with your life. Um, Now, aside from the kind of change in status that we see with some of our veterans,
Mm-hmm.
um, what are some of the treatment methods for dealing with grief? I know there's probably different ones for different aspects of grief, but what are some of the different ones there?
Okay, sure. Let me know if I'm being lectury, because this is a little bit, my academic brain
No,
is
go
turning on now. Okay.
go right ahead. You're fine.
So, if we're talking about normal grief, and we can talk about normal, complicated, and integrated grief, those are like sort of the blanket kinds. But if we're talking about normal grief, I do need to say there's a huge caveat with vets, because a lot of the time there is a trauma or a loss of functioning or an invisible or visible disability. So you're going to have layers here. But in terms of grief counseling, we would focus on one or two. There's two sort of schools of thought. There's the more traditional Kubler-Ross in 1969 published a book on death and dying. And that is how we got our more well understood 5 stages of grief. You ever heard of the 5 stages of grief? You go through
I have not.
denial, it didn't happen,
Oh,
anger, why did this happen to me? Bargaining, I would switch places with this person if I could only see them again, that kind of thing. Depression, and then acceptance. You go through these same things regardless of the type of loss. But then in like around 1982, um, Warden came out with tasks of mourning, a little bit different than stages of grief. This is accepting the reality of the loss processing the pain of the grief and the loss, adjusting to life without the thing that you've lost, and then finding a way to remember what was lost while still moving forward. I tend to go more to the 4 tasks of mourning than the stages of grief, because stages imply you go through one and then the next and then the next as sort of a progression. And that's not how grief works. Not really. You can be doing multiple tasks at once. I miss this thing. I don't know who I am without this identity. I don't know who I'm supposed to be now. You can be angry about that and sad and panicky, while at the same time reminiscing about that time, remembering what you were holding on to. And so you can be doing multiple tasks at the same time. So that's sort of what it would look like. We would go through the tasks of mourning. We would see where you were getting stuck. What were you holding on to? Why? How is it serving you to hold on to anger in this moment? Things like that. It would be a very sort of slow process. That's the tricky part about mental health. It's not really quick. There's no real quick fix. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I personally agree with the 4 tasks of mourning as well. I feel like that you don't necessarily go through all of them in a scheduled order. Like our emotions are not set to a certain schedule unless you like have a panic attack because you hear your alarm every single morning, then maybe it's scheduled. But I don't feel like emotions are scheduled. I don't feel like you can really have a set timeline for how things are to occur. So I would have to agree with you on that. I feel like that makes the most sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
So with the military, we see there's the loss of identity, and then there's also loss of loved ones. So
Yes.
we see so much suicide within the military, and
Yes.
it is so difficult to deal with it. And I know personally, I just had one of my supervisors, I'm pretty sure he committed suicide
I'm sorry.
on Saturday. I
Oh,
think it was Saturday.
okay.
And for me, it's odd, but I'm not saddened by it. I'm sad because I'm sad that there's a loss of life, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not emotionally invested in it. And I don't know if that's because at some point we are just so hardened to the emotions of the suicide of others that we know and that we care for and we love, that we're not so affected by those emotions anymore, which is tragedy in and of itself. So
Yeah,
I'm not.
oh, no, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say there's sort of, it starts as maybe sort of a protective thing, right? I can't keep feeling this over and over and over again. And that can start to turn into like a numbing feeling. Like you feel almost numb to it. Like, oh, this happened. That's sad. But you're not necessarily in that raw feeling of it anymore, like you were maybe the first few times.
Yeah, and I think over time you just become very numb to it. I mean, I know I definitely do not have as many people, and it's really sad, but I know that each veteran has a list, and they know the exact number of how many people have committed suicide or died that they are friends with. And I know some people that are like, I've had 20 of my people commit suicide. I've had 6 people commit suicide that I know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad, but it's literally of everyone I know, there is a list, an ongoing list of
Yeah.
how many people they know have committed suicide, and I feel like that's such a detachment of emotion.
Mm-hmm. Well, since you did bring up the suicide, I did bring some statistics to
Oh,
sort
yay.
of
I
put
love
things into
statistics.
perspective. Yeah. So there are, give or take, approximately 20 million living veterans in the United States right now.
Mhm.
And in 2018, there was 6,435 suicides in the veteran community that were recorded as suicides. It's important to note. Not every death by
Yes.
suicide is recorded as a death by suicide. So this is, if anything, it's an underreporting. The number is probably much more than that.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And so that's approximately, with an age, if you adjust for age and sex, that's almost 30% of the veteran population.
So it's far more than that 22% that we always say.
Correct. Right.
That's,
Those numbers don't adjust for age and sex, which is important to adjust for, because out of 20 million veterans, you're going to have a good percentage of them that are at a certain age where they're going to have chronic illnesses that will turn into terminal illnesses, and they need to be removed from that denominator. Where the option for suicide is almost not an option, as morbid as that sounds. So out of the population that suicide is possible, you're looking at 30% of veterans actually died by suicide in 2018. And it was, the numbers are comparable for the 5 years before that. 6,399, 6,310, 6,554. Suicide rates in the United States have gone up 47% since 2005. Yeah. 46,510 people died by suicide in 2018 in the United States alone. It's a serious issue.
That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. And then also, I don't know, I'm not going to hold it up, but I have this chart. In age ranges of younger adults, or kind of mid adults, so from the ages of 10 to 34, suicide is the second leading cause of death in those age ranges currently, and has been for some time. The first leading cause of death in age ranges 10 to 35 are unintentional injury. So that's like accidents, car accidents, but that also includes overdoses that cannot be deemed suicides. And that's an important distinction, because when you have people suffering from trauma and complicated grief, a lot of times there is a comorbid addiction or self-medicating behavior going on. So some of those unintentional injuries are actually also suicides.
Wow. And for anybody listening, we do carry our Veterans Crisis Line at the bottom of the page. It is 1-800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255. This is for the Veterans Crisis Line. There's always somebody that you can talk to if you've ever thought of suicide, or if it is currently a thought in your head. Or you can even reach out to Billy, Hugh, or I. We are always willing to talk. That's an absolutely mind-blowing number. Like, that's beyond words how many people have committed. And the fact that that the numbers aren't even right on it. And it's probably even, I would say it's probably even higher than 30%. Like, just because some people are not found, or it's ruled as a homicide. Like now recently with a lot of the stuff at Fort Hood and Fort Bragg, where they're like, oh, it was, they rule it as a suicide, but it's a homicide, or they rule it as a person's missing, but really, like, they committed suicide. Hugh has got a question. Is there a measurement for how many of these people committed suicide by which method?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did think about that, and I did look for it, and there isn't, but there is some data on overall suicides, like not just in the veteran community, and most of the, so it is gender, well, I shouldn't say gender, it's sexed, because gender and sex, not the same thing. So females tend to use pills and non-violent lethal means to commit suicide. So it would be pills, drownings, which feels very violent, but that actually has come up. And then males tend to use more lethal means and violent means, such as guns or hanging. That's really, but I don't have the percentages or the numbers on that, but those are sort of the general ways that people commit suicide. Success. It's really the terminology needs to catch up, because it's called like a successful suicide, which sounds pretty awful. I'm not,
Yeah.
it's awful. So when people die by suicide, it's usually one of those four things.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a discussion on here before where the military wanted to get rid of, or somebody wanted to get rid of the word suicide
Okay.
because it was such a harsh word. And we were like, call it what it is. It's suicide, and
Mhm.
it's a harsh reality that happens, and it's not a pretty subject. It's not a nice subject. Suicide is dark and everything about it. And to get rid of the word just because it's dark is
Yeah.
um oh, Hugh is saying what it is. He's saying I got fucking mad is what happened because I can't say commit. So you can't say committed suicide.
Right, because it puts oppression and onus on the person as though they had committed a crime, as though they had done something wrong. They want you to say death by suicide. So
Okay, so that's the reason.
the intention was commit suicide has the implication that you have done something wrong. So it was well intentioned to change that language, but people don't follow it up with like the explanation. They just say, don't say that anymore. And death by suicide is less blaming in a way.
Okay.
You
That
didn't
makes a lot
commit
more sense.
anything. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That makes a lot more sense. To say it like that instead of to, because I think the article that we had read, it did not explain it at all. And we were like, why would you change it? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
It is what it is, and you kind of just, it's not a pretty thing that happens. It's ugly in every manner and aspect, and we
Mhm.
wish nobody would ever commit that. Um, so yeah, that we were very confused about it, but I'm glad that you have now answered our month-longs question.
You're welcome. It's a tricky topic actually, because there are people that believe that you have the right to end your life if you feel that living is unbearable. So we have this sort of survival instinct to say don't, and it's not worth it, and you'll be glad you didn't, and you'll get a lot of that talk. But if a person is in such despair and they've tried everything and they can't bring themselves to go on, it's a little controversial as to whether or not you or I get to have an opinion about that. So I am curious what you think about that.
Um, for me personally, I feel like it is a person's personal opinion what they do with themselves, but at the same time, I don't want them
Mm-hmm.
to make that choice. Especially when you're young. If you're like old and you're dying and you cannot do anything and you're like bedridden, I could understand. Like that I could understand. But when you're
Okay.
young and you have a lot to live for and you're just going through a really rough patch in your life, turning around and asking somebody for help is the best way to go about it.
Okay.
Um and yeah.
Yeah. I
um
agree. Asking for help is a good first step, or
yeah.
second step, or for third step, or hundred step.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always somebody that's willing to talk to you. And I mean, sometimes it's not your friend group, sometimes it's somebody outside of your friend group. My favorite thing to do is to talk to strangers and hear stories from them, which is the weirdest thing ever because I don't like talking to people outside of like my friend group. But
Okay.
if I engage with a stranger, I like it when they tell me stories. And it doesn't have to be anything in particular, just like a story because it tells me about their life and it kind of keeps me grounded,
Mm-hmm.
which is very odd. But it's also, if you're thinking of suicide, maybe your friend group isn't the people to go to. Maybe you can't exactly trust them. Maybe they're too close to you. Maybe they're not close enough. Having that unbiased outside perspective might be helpful, is what I
Mm-hmm.
feel.
In practice, we always put together a safety plan if somebody is having suicidal thoughts and struggling with feeling like they can't go on anymore. We would put together a safety plan, which would include sort of reasons for living, and who would you reach out to? Who do you feel safe with? Who do you feel can actually hold that emotion with you? Because it is not easy to get a call, especially you probably know this, to get a call in the middle of the night from somebody saying, I think I'm going to kill myself. So who do you trust to hold that heaviness with you and not freeze or freak out or sort of not know what to do with it? So sometimes it's helpful to put a safety plan together because you can think through actually who is the person or persons I would call at 3 a.m. when I just can't go on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think an even harder aspect to live with, and I think this ties into the complicated grief you were telling me about before, but is when you are that person that gets that call at 3 in the morning and you miss it.
Yep.
And you wake up the next day and that person is no longer there. That is a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, risks for so speaking of complicated grief, so normal grief, I don't like to use that word, but normal grief is acute grief. It's grief that is that happens suddenly. There is a loss, and you experience this flood of emotions and this rawness to it. You maybe have to make arrangements and figure things out, and you're trying to do all of that while you're also maybe sad or angry or relieved. Everyone feels differently. Maybe you were a caregiver and burdened by this person and then they died and you feel relief but also guilt. So it's very complicated. So you going through this grief, and then over weeks and months it starts to get a little bit better. You draw on social supports, you use distraction, you talk to somebody, maybe you go to counseling, and it slowly gets a little bit better. You work through the tasks of mourning, and then you go into what's called integrated grief, where you always remember this person or thing is no longer here, but you've found a way to let go of some of the pain and the rawness and remember that person and go about your daily activities. And it will come back up, milestones, birthdays, anniversaries, things that remind you. But in general, you're sort of doing okay. And this takes months, weeks to months. Okay. Where you'll have complicated grief is when you have the acute grief and then you don't sort of make it into integrated grief. You get stuck. And that feeling like you have just lost that thing or that person never goes away. And you might have panic attacks. You might cry all the time. You might feel lost, adrift. What am I doing with my life now? I wish I was dead too. Or I wish this had never happened. And you're sort of living pretty much always in the past and in the memories. And being at risk for complicated grief usually happens when the loss is unexpected or violent in some way. There's a history of mood or anxiety disorder. So if you have a history of mood disorders and you encounter a sudden loss, that can lead to complicated grief because you're already struggling to process emotions on a daily basis. The death of a child is another one that can often cause complicated grief. And then for sure in the military for several reasons. If you want to know, I did kind of highlight some of those reasons. Would you want me to highlight?
Yeah.
Okay. So from the national survey that was done on veterans back in 2010, they got 10,000 responses, which we now know out of 20 million isn't a whole lot, but it's something. It's a good, robust study. So 10,000 surveys, right? Most veterans are 55 years of age or older. 63.9% of veterans in 2010 were 55 or older. That means that they're already in an age range where they may have experienced multiple losses in their lives. This is going to put you at risk for a more complicated grief if those losses were not resolved or were more complicated. The other reason is we might not think about it, but well, you probably have. Out of the survey, 33.9% reported having served in combat or a war zone, and 33% reported having been exposed to dead, dying, or wounded comrades. This is going to put you at risk for complicated grief. This introduces a trauma element that other civilians and people don't usually have around death and dying. Okay, that's another reason. Another reason is access to care. So in this survey, only 3% of the people reported using the My Health Vet services and
My
portal.
Healthy Vet, yeah.
Right. My Healthy Vet, yes, excuse me. Only 3% reported actually using or being aware of that website. And then also only 20% indicated they had sought information about their benefits. These are extremely low numbers. This tells us that access to care is an issue, that even if they wanted it, they didn't know how to get it or maybe couldn't afford it. So we've got no access to care, we've got an older population, and we've got a high percentage of individuals who have likely a trauma background. This is going to make it very difficult to process grief in a normal way.
Wow.
That was a lot of data.
Yeah. I at one point, I think it was maybe almost 2 years ago, I actually met a Vietnam veteran that didn't have an ear and he didn't have an arm, and I was talking to him and he was like, "Yeah, well, I'm finally going to the VA to see if I can get care," and I'm like, "You don't have an arm," and he's like, "Yeah, they put me at," I think he said they put him at like 40 or 50% disability. I was like, "You don't have an ear and you don't have an arm. How are you at 40 or 50% disability?" And it, like, anytime you talk to somebody and they obviously should be at like 90 to 100% disability and they're at an extremely low number, it just infuriates everybody. But yeah, those numbers are just like absolutely atrocious.
Right, because if we extrapolate them out to 20 million, that's pretty horrific. Okay, 21% of this sample reported that they have applied for disability compensation or benefits. Okay, applied, didn't get a rating for sure, just applied. Okay,
That could take.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, it could take 6 months to like 4 years. It could take however long for them to give you a rating because they like to sit on their thumbs.
Exactly. So if we extrapolate that out to 20 million vets, right? What do we've got? We've got 4,200,000 vets who applied for benefits. That's what that number would be. That
4 million?
Right. Yeah, if we were to generalize that 21% to the current 20 million vets, we got 4,200,000 vets who potentially applied or should be applying for disability benefits. And we know for sure that the ratings don't guarantee anything, and so we've got literally millions of vets in the U.S. right now who are not getting the care that they need. They're not getting benefits. They're not getting disability benefits. They're not getting supplemental insurance. I mean, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's great.
You are, but it's good. It's good to hear it, and I know he's not watching right now, but Chris Schneier, you better go and apply for your VA benefits. I know he was going to yell at you as well. And then I actually have a friend that I served with, and I asked him if he was getting his benefits, and he said no, he wasn't. And I asked him why. He was so fearful of the VA and of veteran doctors, military doctors. He was so fearful of them that he would literally become petrified just by going to the VA hospital. He had that much fear and anxiety just doing it. And I asked him, I was like, "Can your parents take you? Is there somebody that could take you?" And he said he was fighting to get away, like physically fighting people to get away from the VA hospital. That's how fearful he was. And I know that he's definitely not the only one. Like, there's definitely a ton of people out there that are just so fearful of what they're going to do to them, if they're going to hurt them more. Military doctors in the military aren't the greatest.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, there's some that are really good, and then there's others that are just not. And I know going through that is traumatic in and of itself, and then having to go back and then those people take care of you is extremely difficult.
Absolutely. I think it wasn't until 2012 that the Department of Defense even allowed civilian mental health practitioners to be reimbursed under the TRICARE insurance. So you
Yeah.
didn't even have the option for so long to go somewhere else, to somebody outside of the system that maybe took your benefits. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the system that they have right now is very flawed and it needs to be worked on. I know just with I'm supposed to be corresponding back and forth with my doctors and on the healthy my healthy vet website you're
Mm-hmm.
allowed to do secure messaging with your doctors, but I have such so the Philadelphia VA not super good. It's pretty terrible, not gonna lie. And to talk to my doctors, they need to like route it electronically to me,
Mm-hmm.
but none of them have done that, so I can't even contact my doctors. And I keep
Oh,
telling them over and over again, I cannot contact you. I cannot contact you. And they're like, "Oh, well, we'll figure it out." And I know I'm tech savvy, and if I'm having this issue and I'm young and tech savvy, I could not imagine the 67-year-old veterans that have no idea what is going on. And then to dial out, I have it written on my wall here, the 6 number extension to get to your doctor. Yeah, I have to write it out. The 6 digit extension to get to their doctor after you listen to the 10-minute long intro for each hospital, because I
mm-hmm.
sat through it today. I know how long it is.
Wow.
It's it's absolutely
Yeah.
it's like disgusting how bad it is. And it's so bad. It needs to be fixed. Um I'm go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, you're as you're describing that, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, you're young, you're tech savvy, you have both arms, all your fingers, you're able to see well, right? So when you said like, oh, I have it written out here, there's so much that comes along with being able to even do that. You have a secure and safe place to make that phone call. You have the ability to follow complex instructions. There's so much going on just for you to be able to make that call. And at each step of the way, you're going to have a veteran where that starts to break down. Oh,
Mhm.
well, I would need help making that call, or I don't have the use of both of my arms, and how do I function? And it's really upsetting because there are major advances in medical care and what's called medical homes, where we bring medicine into the home and we build, uh, I guess, accommodations for people so that they can function well at home. And I feel like the veteran community misses out on all of this because they don't have private insurance, because they don't pay out of pocket, and they miss out on the entire infrastructure around the medical home that would help their quality of life to such a degree. And it's really getting a little like heated. It's really upsetting that there's this entire population of people that don't have access to that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is truly upsetting. And I do want to note, because I know in the comments Hugh and Jeannie are getting heated.
Oh,
The
I didn't see.
Philadelphia
I'm
VA.
sorry.
Yeah, they're having an argument.
Okay. Okay.
But they did note that it is improving. Yes, it is improving. I cannot say for certain that the Philadelphia VA is. Um, they literally canceled a breast ultrasound for me, and I'm not ashamed of anything. They canceled a breast ultrasound for me because I'm under 30, and that was their
That's,
whole reason for it. And I was like, but my doctor ordered it. I should get this thing. So the Philadelphia VA has a lot of problems, and they are not. I think they've been voted one of the worst VAs. Um, Contrary to that, though, Hugh, when he was going to the VA in Norfolk and I think he said it was Chesapeake or something, when he was going to those ones, he said they were great. They were always on top of everything. He was able to contact his doctors. They did such a good job taking care of him.
Mm-hmm.
So there's such a disconnect in certain areas. Now, he was in an area where there are a lot of veterans. I'm in an area where there's not a lot of veterans. There's not a whole lot of help.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also makes a difference when in the care that they receive. Um,
Absolutely. I know like San Antonio, Texas is a largely veteran community, and it is
mhm.
very different there when you sort of hear and look at the services and the groups and the buildings and access to care, and it's very different there. I don't know too much about it, but I definitely know that that is sort of a hub for the veteran community in Texas.
Yeah.
I did see though, there are too many veterans who are claiming issues they don't. Am I allowed to read the comment out?
Yeah, go right ahead.
There are too many veterans who are claiming issues they don't have and are delaying care for those who genuinely need it. This is an interesting opinion, and it is unpopular for many reasons, but it is interesting because it's sort of the same argument that's made for public health care in the civilian world. People who are on welfare are don't really need it, and they hold it up or they take a spot from the people that really do. And this has sort of become so politicized, who needs it, who doesn't, um, and who's taking advantage of the system. But so that's like, I don't know if you have thoughts or opinions on that, but that this makes me think about like this part here, claiming issues they don't have. Sort of how do we know that? How do you know in the veteran community that this is happening to such a degree? Like, how do you know somebody is claiming an issue they don't have? How do you decide that somebody's issue is debilitating or not, or enough that they can't function or they've lost quality of life? Like, what are we talking about there?
Yeah, I do
That would be
know
nice.
one person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do actually know one person that did something like this. And I know another person that attempted to just
Mhm.
to receive benefits. So I know somebody that actually stayed awake for a week straight so that they could fool the people doing the claims into thinking that they were actually hearing voices and that
Wow.
they were doing that. And I knew another girl who found out that if you claim that you were assaulted or sexually assaulted while in service, you got 70% disability, which is
Mhm.
not really true.
Okay.
Um, and she attempted to claim this, and they found out that she lied because they asked people, and they're like, nobody ever touched her. Um, so she was denied for that claim, but people have attempted in the past to do something similar.
Why do you
Um,
think they do that? Why do you think your friend did that? Like, if we were to sort of, okay, never mind. I'm turning this into like a therapy session. Never mind.
I know that that girl did it just because she wanted the money. She
Mm-hmm.
wanted to get that 70% disability, and she got out. She got out after her 4 years, and I'm not even gonna lie, she was a dumpster fire of a person. Like, just wild. Like, we would find her underwear out in the smoke pit on like a Tuesday. It was very odd. She she would just do weird things.
Mm-hmm.
So for her to do this, it was almost not unusual. But
Mm-hmm.
it is detrimental to those who do actually have a claim. Um, and then there are others who they do have a legitimate claim to it. Um, and they come forward and the people in the VA are like, well, I don't think that you're truthful enough. I need letters from people that knew you at the time stating that this actually happened to you. And I have had to write letters for girlfriends of mine who have been like, I was sexually assaulted and I knew them during that time period and could see the emotional changes they went through. And I wrote that girl a letter and she's now 100% disabled and
Mm-hmm.
in all honesty cannot work. um, so it's good to see when it works properly, but it's horrible to see when people try to take advantage of the pain that others have gone through. And a lot of it is to get that disability money, which
Mm-hmm. I think that's what Jeannie's
It's
saying.
just
They do it
greedy.
to get the money. She says they do it to
Yeah.
get the money. There's an additional benefit. I just, you know, I think it's tricky. I think it can be really tricky to know sort of when someone's lying or faking, or you know, because also there are systems in place that sometimes keep people from being able to develop skills and things that would help them when they leave the military. So sometimes perhaps it's this feeling like there's no other option, or there could be other things going on, personality disorders, anxiety disorders, and things that people sort of don't cope well, and then it turns into behaviors, manipulative behaviors, things like that. So I'm definitely not saying it doesn't happen. I think it's very nuanced. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's more rare than it is common.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he was saying we have heard it is also very easy to pretend you are missing sensation in parts of your extremities, that GERD is easy to claim hearing loss by just not pressing the buttons. And we hear they do it for more money, that's it. And since you don't need to go to appointments after your claim, they get their money and never go in for services, which I think is countering the claims that the VA needs more providers because people don't go get treatment after they get their money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I know I have hearing loss and I don't need a hearing aid. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yet. But
Okay.
hopefully I will never need, yeah, knock on wood, I'll never need one.
Yeah, hopefully.
But if I had just not pressed those buttons in the audio, whatever it's called, audiogram center,
Mm-hmm.
I could have been like, hey, I need a hearing aid, but then never actually gone to get it and still get paid for it. So,
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So
yeah.
there's not a
Or
lot of
then
no checks and balances going on here.
I think so.
Mhm.
Like I could honestly go in there and make up a whole story about how severe my anxiety is, PTSD, say that I was in combat even though I wasn't. Um, like make up all these stories and
Mhm.
then be diagnosed with PTSD and depression and anxiety and have this rating of let's say 80% and
Mhm.
then never go to a therapy session.
Gotcha. And there's no follow-up to see whether or not you pursue or do any of that.
Yeah. Although I have heard recently that they are starting to reevaluate some people to see if they're keeping up with their health. Um, and as Billy had said, but those who make those stories up 9 out of 10 get caught and lose everything and worse. So,
Mhm. You know, it's the same thing in the civilian world when you file for disability. When you file for
okay.
disability, it takes about 2 years to get approved. And in that time, you have to go to doctors. If you have to get a letter from your therapist, you have to have people write letters to say, oh, well, this person can't take care of themselves. I help them with groceries. I help them with this. You have to get all your things. They make it really difficult. And they do that to try to weed out the people that are just trying to get this money, that are lying, that wouldn't be able to get all of these doctors' letters and things like that. But to your point, by doing that, by saying, okay, we we don't want to give benefits to the 10, probably less than that, 3% of people that are lying. Therefore, we are going to make it harder for everybody else to get them. And so what you end up is in what's called a gatekeeping situation. I, as a clinician, become a gatekeeper between you and your benefits because I now have to decide if you are telling the truth, and I have to decide what your issues are and how long you've had them. Well, I don't decide that. You tell me, and then I agree, and then I have to write up this whole thing, right? So it's exactly what you had to do for your friend. You had to advocate for them. So the
Hmm.
process gets harder and harder and harder. And I think if there was a way to realistically and feasibly sort of identify the fakers or malingers, whatever we want to call it, we would have done this already because the government doesn't want to give out any money it doesn't have to. So I do think that it's really, really hard to have some sort of policy or process in place to decide this. And I think someone said those who make those stories up 9 times out of 10 get caught and lose everything and worse. So you have penalties in the veteran community for lying.
If you get caught that you are lying, I don't know exactly what will happen, but I feel like they will probably make you return the money that they gave you. So however much money you make a month in disability, you'll have to return that.
Okay.
Which is sad.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're lying about it, then I don't really feel bad for you either. And I wanted to ask you, really off topic,
Yeah.
but I wanted to ask you right before we kind of wrap everything up. You had told me about capital T and lowercase t
Yeah.
trauma, and I want everyone to hear about this because I've never heard about this.
Sure. So this is something relatively new in the literature, kind of separating out these traumas as we talk about them. And I'm happy to send you an article afterwards on it if you want.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that'd be wonderful.
So capital T trauma is considered the traumas that create acute PTSDs. They create this loss of safety, fear response, panic. Capital T would be things like sexual and violent crimes against you that produce oftentimes a very traumatic, sudden onset and oftentimes complex trauma. So traumas that go on repeatedly, repeated abuse, repeated sexual or violent abuse. These are going to result, these are what we call the capital T traumas. And then the lowercase t traumas are more related to, I think the example I gave you before, the trauma would be something like, let's say you were repeatedly but non-violently bullied in school when you were younger, and that lingered with you and it affected your self-esteem, your sense of self, developed anxiety, social anxiety from it, but it wasn't an event so drastic or I guess what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say traumatizing but that's pretty much what I mean.
Yeah.
So an event so traumatizing for you that you've lost abilities to function. Whereas with capital T traumas, almost always it impacts your ability to function in your daily life. And I know that this may be triggering for some people right now listening or even in the podcast. I'm not really sure everybody's history. But this is something that in the literature is considered capital T trauma. And then another example of a lowercase t trauma would be like a vicarious trauma. So when you watch the trauma happen to somebody else and you are affected by it and you carry it and you start to develop fears and anxieties and worries about that thing. Those are considered more lowercase t traumas.
That's awesome. I had never heard of it, and when you started talking about it, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm learning a new thing today. And it made me super excited, so I wanted everyone else to hear about it. But thank you so much, Melissa, for coming on. I would love to have you on again if you would like to. I definitely enjoyed this conversation and also learning more about the BA and with grief and just everything we discussed. I truly, truly appreciate you being on here, and thank you so much. If you have anything for our listeners to hear, or you want to put anything out, you have the floor.
Oh, I guess you mean in terms of like advertising? I don't know.
Well, advertise yourself if you have any little tidbits to give out for us, any mental health notes.
Sure. So, well, if you wanted to, like, certainly if there was time, I'm happy to do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding technique with you that maybe people would like to learn how to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I would love to. Let's do that.
You want to do that? Okay. So, okay. Do you know how to do deep breathing? Is that sort of in your toolkit already? Okay. So you would take a deep breath, everyone in through the nose, out through the mouth. Really let all the air out of your lungs when you do that. Try not to hold it. So one more time. Really empty those lungs out, okay? So I'd like you to look around the room and tell me 5 things you can see in as much or as little detail as you'd like.
So I have my lip gloss, I have sunglasses, a pen,
I'm going to ask
my
you to slow down.
notebook.
I'm going to ask you to slow
Oh,
down.
sorry.
It's not a race. Okay, well, it's not just kind of slow down.
I have my notebook, and I have my headphones case. I have my glasses, a pen,
What color?
and a lip gloss. hot pink.
Okay.
Ooh.
Okay. Very nice. Okay. Close your eyes and tell me 4 things you can feel.
My blanket, the carpet, um, the pillow behind me, and the chair I'm sitting in.
Okay. 3 things you can hear. Eyes open or closed, wherever you feel safe.
I can hear the little E in my ear right now. Uh, I can kind of hear just the static of this, and then I can hear the TV a little bit in the other room.
Okay. 2 things you can smell if you can smell anything. Maybe there's a candle or an odor in the room.
I'm pretty sure I can smell my stepdad making buttered chicken in the other room. It smells really good. Um, Maybe I could smell my candle in the other room. I think so.
How does the air feel going up your nose? Crisp, warm, stuffy, cold?
A little stuffy. A little stuffy.
Okay. Tell me 1 thing you can taste. Any leftover dinner in there?
I made a goulash earlier that I can still taste.
How does that taste?
Not very good. I'm not very good at it yet.
Okay. Let's take another deep breath into the nose, out through the mouth. Drop the shoulders, sink into the chair. How do you feel?
I feel very stiff. I
Very
feel I feel like I could take a nap now.
okay. I will teach you to cook, your friends say.
Yeah.
Okay. I like some of the things people were noticing and feeling. Scotch, cigar, matches, space heater. Those are pretty good ones. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is good for when you feel like you are in your head and your thoughts are racing and you're sort of feeling a little out of control, maybe of your body. Um, it's a grounding exercise that brings you back into the here and now. It's based on a Buddhist mindfulness technique of be where your feet are. So, how do we bring our presence back into this moment? So, if you can use your senses, all of your senses, that'd be great to bring yourself back into the moment and sort of out of your head and out of those thoughts. So,
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely feel much calmer now.
okay, good.
But thank you so much for coming on, Melissa, and I loved having you. I hope I can have you on again soon, and we can do another mindfulness practice or
That sounds
our
good.
5 steps here.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
No problem. Thank you, Melissa. All right. Thank you guys so much. I know at the bottom of the screen, Billy, if you could please put it up, our veteran suicide line for us. Melissa was super wonderful for coming on. If you have any questions for her, we'll reach out to her and ask her the questions. But our Veterans Crisis Line, 1-800-273-8255, or you can text 838-255 if you need to talk to somebody or if you need a minute just to kind of center yourself. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. There are a ton of resources that you can use. There's Hick Strong. They do counseling services for free for veterans and for active duty members as well. So there's always somebody that you can talk to. You're never alone in your fight against grief, bereavement, whatever, depression, whatever you're going through, there's always somebody for you to talk to. Thank you guys for stopping in, and I'll see you next time. Bye.